I'll never forget that afternoon. And honestly, I don't think any of my neighbors will either, because it was the day the queen bee of our little cul-de-sac finally stung herself. You know how every neighborhood has that one person who thinks they're in charge of everyone else, the one who struts around like they own every square foot of the block? Well, in our case, that person was Linda. She wasn't officially anything, no HOA title, no city authority. But she wore her self-importance like a crown, handing out fake violation slips, sending out letters she typed up herself about community standards, and basically scaring off anyone who dared challenge her. For years, people just rolled their eyes, kept their heads down, and prayed she wouldn't come after them. But then she decided to come after my wife, and that's when everything flipped. It started right in my driveway on a Saturday morning. Linda stood there with her hands on her hips, squinting at us like she was about to hand down a sentence from a courtroom bench. Her voice carried across the street, sharp and self-righteous. "Your wife is impersonating a federal officer. I've already reported her." Just like that, she declared it in front of half the block, loud enough for the curtains to shift, and for faces to peek out. Some folks smirked, others whispered because everybody knew Linda lived for this kind of drama. But even they weren't ready for what came next. My wife, Caroline, didn't flinch. She just looked at Linda with that calm, steady gaze of hers, almost amused, like she was watching a kid put on a Halloween skit. Linda, meanwhile, had her phone clutched in her hand like it was evidence straight out of a courtroom drama. She dresses up in a costume, flashes some fake badge, and tries to intimidate people around here, she said, her chin jutting out in defiance. That's a crime, and I won't let her get away with it. I tried stepping forward, my voice level but firm. "Linda, are you sure this is the road you want to go down?" She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might stick. "Don't threaten me. I know the law." And just like that, she doubled down, pointing at my wife and demanding she be arrested, right there on the spot. The arrogance in her tone made my blood pressure spike, but Caroline stayed ice cold. She slipped her hand into her jacket pocket, slow and deliberate, and the whole street collectively held its breath. You could see the neighbors leaning forward behind their curtains, expecting some grand showdown. Linda even grinned, ready for the humiliation she was convinced was about to unfold. But when Caroline flipped open that leather case, the air itself seemed to freeze. What gleamed in the sun wasn't some knockoff or eBay novelty. It was the real deal, a federal badge that carried more weight than Linda could ever imagine. Her jaw literally dropped, and you could almost hear the thud as her confidence hit the pavement. Caroline's voice was soft, but it rolled across the yard like thunder. "You should be careful who you accuse. This isn't a costume, and I don't impersonate, I serve." For a split second, there was nothing but stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Linda trying to backpedal. "That can't be real. You probably bought it online," she stammered, scanning the neighbors for backup. But no one moved. They were too busy staring at the badge. She jabbed her finger again, clinging to the last shred of her power. "I already called the sheriff. When they get here, you'll see. They'll expose you." She tried to laugh, but it came out like a broken whistle, shaky and hollow. Caroline just slipped the badge back into her jacket and said with that icy calm, "Good. Let's wait for them." That was the first time I saw Linda hesitate, shifting from foot to foot, like she suddenly realized she'd stepped into quicksand. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, the sirens weren't blaring, but 2 sheriff cruisers rolled up, lights flashing red and blue against the houses. Linda bolted toward them like she was leading a parade, arms waving dramatically. "Officers, over here. She's pretending to be federal. She's scaring people. Arrest her now." The deputies stepped out, hands resting on their belts, and strolled toward Caroline with the kind of calm confidence that comes from already knowing the truth. They gave her a respectful nod, and that's when Linda's speech sputtered to a halt. One of the deputies looked at her with a mix of irritation and disbelief. "Ma'am, do you know who you're talking about?" "Yes," she snapped. "A fake agent." The deputy chuckled, shaking his head. "Fake? Lady, she's the real deal, and you're about 2 seconds away from making the biggest mistake of your life." And right there, in front of everyone, his radio crackled as he called in. "Control, confirm clearance on Special Agent Carter." The static lasted only a second before the voice on the other end replied, "Confirmed. Federal clearance active. Advise. Respect." Neighbors gasped, some even pulling out their phones to record, and Linda's face drained of all color. She whispered frantically, "That's not possible. She lives here like the rest of us. Real agents don't mow their lawns or walk their dogs." You could see her words were less about convincing us and more about convincing herself, like her whole reality was collapsing in real time. Caroline took a step forward, her voice calm but razor sharp. "You thought you could paint me as a criminal, that your lies would stick. But here's the truth. You just filed a false report against a federal agent." Linda's eyes darted like a cornered animal. I didn't mean. I was just protecting the neighborhood." But the deputy cut her off sharply. "Enough. Filing a false police report is a crime. Harassing a federal officer, that's even bigger." His partner pulled out a pair of cuffs, the metallic glint catching the sunlight. And in that moment, the entire street leaned forward, as if they were watching the climax of a long-running drama. Linda shrieked, "Don't touch me. I'm the victim here." She spun her words louder, trying one last desperate trick, but the deputy's voice was steady as stone. "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back." The neighbors didn't miss a beat. Phones were everywhere, whispers turned into a low hum of excitement, and some folks even started clapping when the cuffs snapped shut. That sound, the sharp click of metal, echoed like a gunshot in the quiet street, and it was the sound of her so-called authority crumbling. One older man muttered, "About time." And the words rippled through the crowd. For the first time, people who had been silent for years found their voices, muttering, laughing, even cheering quietly. Caroline folded her arms, her face unreadable but her presence commanding. She stepped closer, leaned in just enough for Linda to hear, and said softly, "You accused me of impersonating authority when all this time it was you. Fake HOA notices, fake rules, fake threats. And now, everyone sees it." Linda's eyes darted desperately, searching for a single sympathetic face, but all she found were cold stares and phone cameras. She whimpered, "You don't understand. I was trying to keep control. This neighborhood needs me." But the deputy clicked the cuffs tighter and shook his head. "No, ma'am, what this neighborhood needed was freedom from you." As they guided her toward the cruiser, her voice cracked with shrill promises. "You'll regret this. I'll sue all of you. I'll own this whole block." But instead of fear, her words sparked laughter. The neighbors actually chuckled, a younger couple even clapping while they filmed. And when she was finally shoved into the back seat, her face pressed against the window, her screams muffled by the glass, the whole block seemed to exhale at once. One kid yelled, "Guess the HOA president just got evicted." And the crowd burst out laughing. It was like years of tension snapped all at once, replaced by a lightness nobody realized we'd been missing. The deputies turned to Caroline, tipping their hats with genuine respect. "Agent Carter will file the charges. False report, harassment, obstruction. She'll be spending a long night in booking." Caroline just nodded, her eyes burning with quiet fire. "Make sure the record's clear. Every neighbor deserves to know what she really is." One deputy smiled at me and added, "You've got one hell of a wife." And I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head. "Yeah, tell me about it." As the cruiser pulled away, Linda's muffled face faded down the street, but the neighborhood didn't go back to normal silence. It buzzed with chatter, relief, disbelief, even a sense of celebration. People who had tiptoed around her for years finally let their guard down, finally shared stories, finally laughed together without fear of her next outburst. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Caroline knew it too. We could both feel it in the air. This was just one battle in a bigger war, because people like Linda never go quietly. They cling to control until the very last breath. And maybe that's what made this day stick in everyone's memory. It wasn't just her downfall. It was the moment we all realized we didn't have to live under her shadow anymore. So now, when I think back to that day, I see it like a movie scene. The flashing lights painting the houses, the sound of cuffs snapping shut, the neighbors' laughter cutting through years of silence. And I wonder what you'd think if it happened on your street. Was Linda just a control freak drunk on her own power? Or was she a cautionary tale about what happens when communities let one voice dominate too long? Do you think she deserved to be humiliated the way she was, or did justice finally catch up to her? That's what I'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts down below. Tell me if you've ever had a Linda in your neighborhood, someone who made life miserable until they finally got called out. And if this story made you smile, or reminded you of your own neighborhood battles, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and let's see how many people have lived through the reign of a self-appointed HOA queen. Because trust me, you're not alone.